Andy Farrell has named his British and Irish Lions squad for 2025. We have another cohort of Lions, and over 38 players can put their name down as being Lions forevermore. How are we feeling about this initial squad that Farrell has named? What's your broad impression as we look back on it?
Delighted, to be honest. It's obviously a great squad because he's picking 38 of the best rugby players in the continent, But yeah, it's absolutely brilliant to see so many players who I've wanted to cheer for many, many times. I've said this earlier, but I've never cheered for a team that has Ben Earl on it before, and I've always wanted to because he's a really good player, and it's great that he can finally be one of my guys, But overall about the squad selection, quite surprised in certain sections that I think we probably slightly overestimated, certainly from an attacking sense, the Farrell system and how heavily he'll lean on that. It depends on kicking we'll come on to later on. But yeah, there's a few players that I didn't expect to go because I thought Farrell just wouldn't rate them to run his system,
My broad impression is very much that Andy Farrell has picked something closer to a list of 38 best players in Britain and Ireland than perhaps we expected, having looked at his squads in past.
Yeah.
Where his squads are not always the 38 best players in Ireland.
Yeah.
So I didn't expect his squad to be that, the 38 players who run his system best. And yet he has tweaked that a bit. Fly half, I think, is a really interesting position. We won't get too hung up on it, but Sam Prendergast is a 10 who runs that system incredibly well, has been running it since he was about 4 years old, and he is now 8 and has been running it for 4 years. But instead, he's gone for Finn Russell, Marcus Smith and Finn Smith, who are the 3 best and most talented 10s available.
Yeah, and the most adaptable, I reckon. The thing that I think we often overrate Finn Smith's game management, but also he does run maybe the best attack in the Premiership. Yeah. So as an attack manager, he clearly is adaptable, and he's come into international rugby and he's been brilliant. Yeah. So I'm really delighted for Finn Smith. Obviously, Finn Russell, in terms of adaptability, that is kind of his thing, because he came through as this young, flashy, exciting 10 who made loads and loads of risky plays, and then grew into a game-managing 10 who kicks long and finds loads of space in the backfield. And now he's older, he's kind of averaged out, he's a bit of both. And I think that is a really good sign for Andy Farrell, that he can lean on Finn Russell to be a bit of both of those things. And you also have Marcus Smith, who.
Interesting thing is that all 3 of these 10s are very, very different players.
Yeah.
They are diametrically opposed. You have 3 different ways of playing, depending on who you select in that fly half shirt, which is hugely interesting, because traditionally, when you look at it, you've had different accents on the same words as the way Farrell's picked his 10s, right? That Crowley and Prendergast aren't night and day apart, but Crowley's more of a game manager, Prendergast's more of an attack manager. You've got kind of differences here and there. Again, you look at, Frawley is very much a system player, and we've just seen that down in the years. What he's gone for is the 3 best 10s, and they all play the game very differently. And what he's hoping, I think, is that they're all adaptable, because they all are. And we know that Marcus Smith, he gets a lot of criticism because people think he's the player he was 5 years ago, and he very much isn't.
No.
He's come on so far in the last few years, and his ability to adapt to a game plan and play to a structure and a system is outstanding.
His passing and tactical kicking are phenomenal.
Yeah, people ignore that. People miss that. And Farrell hasn't, which I think is fantastic. One of the other areas, though, that I do think is interesting is the other real contentious position, which is the back row.
Yeah.
So, if you look at that position, he has selected one of the smallest back rows available. And we were wondering if he picked some guys for pure size. Caelan Doris, we're assuming would have been in, but is missing out because of his injury. We still don't know the full extent of it, but I'm assuming this will rule him out for the entire tour.
Yeah.
Instead of picking a straight extra number 8, he's gone Ben Earl, Jack Morgan, can play 8, Tom Curry can play 8.
And Jack Conan is the 1 proper 8 there.
Yeah, he's gone for 1 proper number 8. He wasn't tempted by Falatau. That's probably the next out. And
or Tom Willis.
Or Tom Willis. Instead, he's gone for that. He hasn't picked the biggest, and yet everyone is a ball carrier who punches above their size. The interesting thing about that back row is, 1, you don't have an out-and-out line-out jumper in there. No. Conan's a decent jumper. And then Pollock, Van der Fleer, Morgan, all can jump. Conan, Earl, all can jump. But none of them are a line-out forward, right? In the way you look at the previous squad, Warren Gatlin selected, and every forward was a line-out jumper.
You look like Peter O'Mahony was picked for his line-out jumper.
Tipperick for his line-out
Tipperick, yeah. I thought Jamie Ritchie might have been able to snag that spot this time round.
No such thing.
Instead, and also the one thing that I think we got majorly wrong was assuming that there would definitely be a lock/6 hybrid in there, and there isn't anyone to speak of that.
You've
No
got
Ryan
two
Baird, no
players in
Courtney Laws.
as specialist locks who can all play in the back row.
Yeah.
But really, they're a second row who can play back row.
Yeah.
Rather than that hybrid, you say Baird or Laws.
Got Chesham, Byrne, Itoje could all shift out. But the interesting selection up front is Scott Cummings.
Yeah.
That I think he's probably the most surprising name, the person that the least people had down. And now he thoroughly deserves this call-up because he's one of the best line-out forwards and also hits a lot of rucks, which Andy Farrell really likes in the second row.
I think that's the big thing, is that ruck and that dog work that he gets through. There is a question mark about his penalty count. I think that's the one thing that comes up when you talk about Scott Cummings. Obviously missed a bunch of games, banned end of last year from the autumn and picked up a red card there for Scotland. But has been a great player. Has been playing really well for Glasgow since coming back from injury. And he's one of those players I can understand the moment his name was called why Farrell likes him.
Yeah.
As you said, the line-out is useful. I kind of had this thought right after we put out the video that went up yesterday, right after we recorded it, that the forwards coach is John DL, who is the Scotland forwards coach. He is really a line-out guy. He is a specialist line-out guy. He's obsessed with the line-out. He's obsessed with the maul. I kind of had the thought, like, there's no way he's not going to take a Scottish lock as his guy.
Or at least Jamie Ritchie.
Yeah. He's not going to take someone who can run that line out and run that system and understands it.
Who he knows.
So I was leaning, and I said this on the live stream we did, but towards Grant Gilchrist going over Dav Jenkins. But turned out it was Scott Cummings who went for instead, who is a huge man. Like, that size is significant. Fits the mould, I think, of George Martin being ruled out.
John DL will implement his own line-out into this, right? It's not going to be Andy Farrell's call, what the line-out calls are. John DL is going to implement what he wants, run the line-out in his own way. He's going to want somebody who can help teach everybody else that. It's much the same as we said this on the live stream, but like all of the wingers that he's picked are slightly different.
Yeah.
But he's got Mac Hansen, who runs in the most typical Farrell way of what he likes out of a winger. It's exactly the same out of Scott Cummings. That as a line-out guy, it's really, really important having someone like that. The analogy I've made a few times now is on the previous Lions tours, there's been somebody who punches above their weight in terms of test selection because they're really good in the line-out. You look at Ian Henderson, you look at Adam Beard, you look at George Cruz, and you look at, most famously, Jeff Parling, who was competing against the likes of Alan Wynne-Jones and Paul O'Connell and Richie Gray, players who you would say are all better players than Jeff Parling, but he was the best line-out forward on tour, and so he got in the test team off the back of that. Scott Cummings, I could so easily see being that guy on this tour.
Yeah. I want to pick up on the back row a tiny bit more, and we'll come back to the back three, because the one thing those back rowers do have in common, which I think you've got to look for patterns in here, is their work rate, is their speed off the ground. All of them are players who, when you look at their stats, their total involvements are coming in below the 1.5 count.
Yeah.
All of them
as
are
in
players
minutes between involvements,
right?
Rather than making less than 1.5 involvements per game, of course.
Yeah.
Much more than that.
The thing that Farrell is looking for is not how far you carry, how many metres you make, how often you make breaks. It is how many total involvements do you make.
Yeah.
And Henry Pollock being the top tackler at the weekend, I think helped him more than his try did.
Yeah.
I think that was the thing. If we pick up on the big inclusion, which is Henry Pollock, and it's weird because he's sort of flown under the radar for such an outside selection. He played one senior game at the start of the season.
Yeah.
He played one game for Northampton last year.
He's played about 15 minutes of test rugby at this point.
And yet scored 2 tries.
Yeah. But I think you're right. It's the quantity, it's the energy of Henry Pollock that is. And when I say quantity, I mean quantity of involvements, the quantity of carries. You look at Jameson Gibson-Park as the centrepiece of this team, right? The rationale behind what you were just saying about total involvements and work rate, right? That it is more effective if you can get the ball out super quickly. Think of it as a defender, you're getting up off your feet just after having made a tackle, backpedaling back into the defensive line, and you're like, oh, he's already running at me again. Yeah. You know, your tackles will get weaker than they would be carrying against a more physical, more aggressive and stronger carrier with less of a work rate, who you get some time to, you know, take a breath, compose yourself and tackle them. Yeah. You know,
so actually you back up on your feet and have your leg position in shape.
Yeah, and so he's gone for work rate, which means that there'll be more carries and the opposition will have to make more tackles. There'll be more lead in the legs, and therefore they're going to give up cheap meters to this back row.
Yeah, which comes back to how Farrell teams play. And I do want to pick on Pollock a bit more, right? Because he needed that game at the weekend to get in. I don't think he gets in without it. I don't think it's a reflection of just picking on form or just picking a guy on recency bias. I think it was a fact you had a guy, you could see the raw materials, you could see he was potentially Lions quality, but he hadn't done it in a game at top intensity. And that game against Leinster gave him that performance and gave him a chance to put aside any of the qualms he had in the first 10 minutes, you know? We kind of put those to bed and was like, no, I'm just going to get on and be a serious test match player. And he showed he can be that.
Yeah.
And I think that was enormous. We saw him reload into the attack repeatedly, which is hugely beneficial to playing.
And contesting so many breakdowns. And as you say, like, I say he's only played 50 minutes of Test rugby. Let's face it, that's a Test match.
Yeah,
a European semi-final against Leinster's fully loaded team with Geordie Barrett coming off the bench, like that is pretty much as good as a Test match.
Yeah.
You know, and as you say, like it's the energy and work rate that he brings on both sides of the ball. Yeah. He will contest as many breakdowns as he can, really try and slow down that ball and be a real nuisance. If he made it to the Test, it would surely be like respect game between him and Fraser McWright, having a competition of who can hit the most.
Speaking of hitting a lot of breakdowns,
yeah,
Xander Fagerson is in. Finlay Bealham is not. Fagerson's injury, we wondered if that would rule him out, considering he's going to be out until he'll probably be back around the first or second game. And they wondered if they may want numbers there. They have gone with him. That is interesting. Those props, if you look at them as a unit, as the six, they're all ball players. Farrell likes to use his tight head as a distributor, as a first receiver, an awful lot. So I think he's gone for people to fit that mould brilliantly in both the loose heads and tight heads. However, there are, on the Xander Fagerson front, an awful lot of players who are carrying injuries in this squad. You've got Fagerson, you've got potentially multiple wingers in Hansen's carrying an injury, you've got Duan van der Merwe's carrying an injury, Kinghorn's carrying an injury, you've got Tuipulotu who could play this weekend, but we don't know what he's going to be like. You've got so many players who there are question marks over and may come into the camp and be unable to train. And I wonder if we'll see more players called up to train and be opposition in the way we saw 4 years ago. Ronan Kelleher got called up initially to train and then ended up as the travelling reserve for that game against Japan, and then ended up on tour, got called up later down the line. I wonder if we see something like that. We might see a few more players come in and act as tackle bag holders. Yeah,
particularly for that Argentina game. If you're looking at Leinster, who have 12 players going, potentially getting into the OLC final, most of those boys, if not all of those boys, aren't going to be available for the Argentina game the following week.
6 days later.
Yeah, so it's going to be difficult playing a Test match 6 days after a ULC final. But yeah, I think the Fagerson thing, it's a case of him scratching the itch, isn't it? That we said before that Fagerson is the perfect Farrell tight head in the amount of rucks he hits. And, it's all well and good having a back row who are really willing to carry the ball. Somebody's got to secure that. And I think Fagerson's got the perfect work rate for something like that. Absolutely. If he's fit, Farrell will want to see what he's like.
Yeah, I think he's got a very, very good shot at the Test team.
Yeah.
However, I think one of the most interesting areas when you look at the squad, when you look at them as units, right, is the back three. Because they are all such different players, similar to fly half. He hasn't gone for a profile. The interesting selection is also Elliot Daly, who I wonder if is being looked at. He's been included at the expense of extra centre. He's only gone for 4 centres rather than 5, as you'd expect from kind of the broad numbers. However, he's picked Daly as a utility option. I think we're expecting either Daly or Osborne to go as the guy who can play everywhere, but also, critically, the left-footed option.
Yes. So, at the end of the video we did yesterday, I said on the board, if Darcy Graham doesn't go and Jamie Osborne does, that is why. It's the left foot. Now, Jamie Osborne didn't go, but Elliot Daly has. Yeah. He's very similar in terms of profile as a player to Jamie Osborne, but has been on 2 Lions tours before. So, and you made that point before of who do you want to talk to under the sticks? Do you want the exciting young talent, or do you want Elliot Daly, who's forced his way into 2 Lions teams, Test teams before? And it is Elliot Daly. But yeah, Andy Farrell, as I've said 1,000 times before, does not budge on that he wants at least one left-footed kicker in every backline that he plays, and not just the scrum half, somebody outfield who can just slap the ball long. James Lowe is usually that guy, and Elliot Daly is in as a centre, but if James Lowe picks up a niggle, you can imagine that come Test time, Elliot Daly will be the next cab of the rank to play left wing for him, or even just play somewhere else in the back line and slot in on that left position.
Exactly. Could be he plays fullback, but he ends up playing the James Lowe role.
Or at 13 with Duan on the wing, and that the two of them just swap position when it comes to exiting, That Elliot Daly's really, really adept at that. Here's a video of him kicking a ball into a bin from 50 metres away. He's got a very accurate left boot on him, and he sends it bloody miles. Plus, he kicks goals from 60 plus metres.
Which we saw in 2017 was such a critical weapon, led to that, drawing that Test series, was him hitting a goal from his own half in the late stages of that game.
Yeah.
So that's a really, really useful tool for the Lions to be able to deploy. I think there are so many positives to bringing Elliot Daly that he gets in despite the negatives, which are his speed has gone.
Yeah.
But, as we said before, James Lowe plays almost every game for Ireland. Andy Farrell doesn't mind having a slow winger.
He it wasn't him, it was Easterby, but Ireland put him straight back in, even though there was an injury doubt about him, because he is that crucial to their system. And I'm not talking attacking system that were potentially over-egged here, but the defensive and the exiting system that they are clearly so set on.
Speaking of defensive system, the other interesting call that I think we didn't have too high up was Luke Cowan-Dickie.
Yes.
Who has been very good for England this year, but I think a lot of us pointed to Jamie George and went the leadership option, midweek captain, past Lyon, and Dewi Lake as the exciting talent who I still
Big
think,
ball carrier, Dewi Lake.
in terms of what he can do with the ball in hand and also the way he hits, he's one of the best hookers available in the world, really. But Luke Cowan-Dickie...
Again, one of the best hookers in terms of just hitting things, though.
Yeah. Incredibly physical, really good at the breakdown, both in terms of jackal threat, but also on his own ball. Hits an awful lot, covers a lot of ground there. Total involvement's very, very high. But the big thing he has going for him is the chop tackle.
Yeah, it is assisting other people to get over that ball.
Yeah.
There's a lot of breakdown threats in that back row that we talked about. Talked about Pollock, Morgan, Van der Fleer, Conan even. That there's a lot of players, even Bernard Itoje in the second row, both huge breakdown threats. So, yeah, Cowan-Dickie is a dark horse to slip into that team because he might set up a load of turnovers for those boys by getting people straight on the floor, opening up the ball for somebody to steal.
So the one other note I want to finish on, and we'll wrap this up. We're going to do a video next week on how the Lions might play. Now we have this squad in mind. Now we can break it down a little bit. Now we can compare it to Andy Farrell. Now we know what they're looking at. However, one player I'm absolutely delighted to get in is Sione Tuipulotu.
Oh, so relieved to see his name on there. I imagine, because of the fact he's not played since January, Andy Farrell has been eyeing him up for years. Basically, since he got the phone call to ask him to be the Lions head coach, he's probably been looking at him and going, I can structure a whole attack around this guy. And getting Finn Russell out of his boot and getting Hugh Jones running off him. Super chuffed for the guy. I think he's an incredible player. He has such a triple threat in terms of carry, pass, kick, and defensively so sound as well. Also Scotland captain just before he got injured. And yeah, really deserves the call. I'm so chuffed for the guy.
Yeah, I'm so intrigued by what this will look like in attack. When you look at him attack for Glasgow, he is often the first receiver, or he is getting multiple touches of the ball. He's being involved twice second. He's getting out there. And yes, he'll hit space from wide channels, but it tends to be when it opens up. He's often actually the first guy touching the ball. And so, that is not typically how the centres use in the Farrell system. Are they looking at him differently? Are they looking to play a different role? Have they just gone, this guy can clearly do everything?
He can.
I'm really intrigued by how they deploy him. That's something we'll get into next week. But in the meantime, as a broad reflection, I think my general takeaway from this squad is, yes, there's only 2 Welsh players, but ultimately that means there's 36 players that I can grow to love and enjoy watching.
They're not Welsh players, they're Lions.
Exactly. From this moment forward, all of these players are Lions. And I am over the moon for Jack Morgan as my guy who I've watched come through since he was a kid and seen him develop from promising youngster who was in the second team for Justin Tebrick.
And now he's one of those.
Potentially a test Lion.
Yeah.
And that is outstanding.
Or just any Lion.
Well, yeah, but like it is always so exciting to see your guy grow like that. And that is one of the great privileges, and I'm sure we're all having that with someone we've watched with our club going down the last few years. However, ultimately, the other thing I'm excited for is like I get to cheer for Tommy Freeman. I get to cheer for Ben Earl. I get to cheer for
Josh van der Fleer.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's so much Scott Cummings. There's so many of these players who have never been my guy before and now get a chance to do that. And ultimately, that is what the Lions is all about, and I'm so excited.
Yeah.